All right, so yeah, so essentially what we're going to do today is I'll chat a little bit about the app and what you can do with it, and then Jeff is going to be doing a demo of the app. So what is LandPKS? So LandPKS is a free mobile app that lets land managers collect data and generate reports on a variety of things, including soil texture, color, identification, vegetation cover and structure, soil health indicators, habitat suitability, as well as various cultivation techniques that might be suitable for your land. So why LandPKS? Like, why is it useful? Why is it unique? So really what the goal of the app does or is to take data from national and international data sets about soil, wildlife, and climate, and then pull data about your land in particular from those data sets. It also will kind of guide you in the field to say what, take observations of this, this, and this. And then we have different algorithms and ways to combine those two different sources of information, the sort of national data set and then the local observations, to provide really hyper-localized information about your land. It can also be used for data collection and monitoring over time. Some reasons why it's helpful for users. So it is free to download and use. The results get delivered to your phone. It is designed to work with or without data in the field. So there's different ways to either pre-download data or synchronize data later if you don't happen to have data out in the field. It also pulls from either NRCS if you're within the United States, or different global data sets about soil to help pull in that information for users. It backs up data into the cloud. And then the vegetation monitoring protocol that we'll talk about is compatible with AIM and NRI data. So NRCS BLM compatible. So if you're working on an equip project in the planning or monitoring stage, that can be a really helpful tool because it allows you to compare your data to national data sets. So just a quick little visualization of what kind of happens when you're using the app. So you pull up in the app, you create a site. A site is basically just a specific location saying, this is where I'm going to go collect data, or this is where I'm currently at. So with that data, we can do things like pull climate data and habitat data right off the bat. It'll then guide you through collecting more information in the data input tab on things like soil texture, color, slope, which then feeds into that soil ID algorithm. And it'll generate a couple, I think 8 predictions for you using both the NRCS data. And then if you put in your own data, it'll update that. And so it helps you figure out the exact type of soil that you have. There are also soil health and vegetation monitoring features, and then can generate reports on those as well. There is also this synchronize now button that you'll see on the top on the app. And what that does is it pulls down new data, but it also stores your data in our data portal that you can access on our website. So some more specific things you can do in the app. So when we talk about determining your soil texture, that's something that people have a variety of comfort levels with. So if you are on the less comfortable side on determining your soil texture, there's this handy little guide me button. And then it will basically take you into this little texture guide that asks you some basic questions, and then has little videos to show you, like, what does it mean if we're asking, does the soil form a ball? So it shows, get the soil, get it wet, roll it into a ball. How to make a ribbon, those types of things. We also have a tool that helps you determine soil color based on the smartphone camera. And so basically you just take a reference card, which could be a 3M Post-it note, and then it will calibrate and tell you what the soil color is that you are looking at. So once you do texture and color, you can then, that will help inform your soil identification. And so this is that list I mentioned. And the cool thing is, if you click on the name of one of those soils, it'll take you into a page that shows you specific information about that particular type of soil. And if there's one available, it will also link you to the ecological site description, which can be tremendously helpful. So again, once you kind of have more information about your soil, we can also do a better job of predicting available water holding capacity and infiltration rates. There's also a slider here, so you can play around with if there's different types of different levels of organic matter or different amounts of compaction, how that might impact those two different metrics. As mentioned, there are a lot of soil health metrics. So we've got the NRCS cropland and field indicators, as well as some supplementary erosion indicators from IIRH. Now, most of the data that you input in the app is designed to be observational, so not necessarily requiring tools to do measurement with, because we do want this to be something that you can just take out into the field and not have to bring along a ton of equipment with you. There are a couple places in soil health where you can actually put in, like if you have a pH test or something like that, you could put that data in to track it. Otherwise, everything else should be just observational. And so here's a list of those soil health indicators. There's also a series of videos on our website that basically has a video walking through each of these indicators and kind of how to conduct those observations. So that's soil health. Then there is vegetation and land cover monitoring. And so essentially what you can do is it's got a calendar feature. And so every time you go out into the field, you just tap on that day, and then it'll have you walk these 4 different transects from your site and collect data about vegetation. And so this is again, a low tech observational technique. All you need is a yardstick with 5 marks on it, or even just a yard long stick that you find in the field. And so this is one that we can talk through in a little bit more depth, but this is the one that is AIM and NRI compatible methodology. And so essentially what you're going to do is just go out in those 4 different directions, stop at 5 different intervals, 5-meter intervals along the way, and then collect 5 little data points at each spot of what kind of vegetation is here. So I think it's helpful sometimes to visualize what this actually looks like. So you're going 5 paces out, he's got his yardstick, he's going to drop it and take an observation at 5 different points along that yardstick. So in this case, maybe he's calling out to a coworker, oh, bare ground, rock fragment, woody litter, and then somebody else can put that data, or you can just have your phone and do it yourself. And so this can take a little bit of time to learn how to do this, but once you are pretty familiar with it, you can generally do those 4 transects in about 20 minutes at a site. So it's not incredibly onerous to try to do this monitoring method. So what that kind of looks like at the ground level, just a different video here.
Woody litter, because it's actually hitting this twig. If I'd hit the leaves on this, that would be herbaceous litter. I scroll down the screen and I record woody litter. I then go to the next point and I've intersected a grass. This happens to be a perennial grass. It is not alive, but it is still rooted. So we are going to record it because it is still persistent on the plot. It's protecting the plot. I then look underneath that perennial grass, and what I find is that I've actually hit the base of that grass, and that's also very important. So we go ahead and re-record plant base at that same mark.
All right, so there's 2 full longer videos that I pulled these little clips from that you could go watch if you're curious to see the whole methodology. But I just kind of wanted to help you visualize that before we get into the app demo, because I think it can be helpful to know, like, this is what you're doing out in the field when you're actually entering this data. So now, I mentioned the wildlife habitat module. This basically pulls from your soil ID and your vegetation data to say, oh, a black-footed ferret needs these types of soil textures. These are the ones that you recorded, and then you can check to see if those match up or not. So as mentioned, there is a data portal on the web where you can go and access your data and other people's data if they chose to make it public. So this can be a really cool way to just see what kind of data has been collected in your area or not, and kind of compare across different land types and things like that. As mentioned, we do have a lot of content on our website. So if you go to the website, which is landpotential.org, I can put that in the chat in just a minute. We've got these learning collections that are kind of geared towards different groups of folks. And then there's a list of, in order, kind of different short articles and videos that might be helpful for folks in that particular area.
So I'm just going to open the app. The first time you open it, there are a couple of intro screens. I currently have a lot of data that I've saved. As Laura noted, actually, you could use this app without ever saving any data. So if I go down to tools down here at the bottom, you'll see that we've got many of the functions listed. And if you want to use those functions, and I'm just going to show you one right here, which is the texture guide. For example, you're out in the field. This guide actually takes you through what's currently the USDA's soil texture key. If you're familiar with that. So it came up with a sandy loam here. And so then I can use that texture and put it into whatever function I'm using. So it hasn't recorded anything. Same with soil color, the slope meter, etc. And I would encourage you to simply just open up the app, click on tools, and you can play around with any one of these functions. The soil health methods is kind of nice too. It's actually not a tool, it's a library. And it describes for those of you that are familiar with NRCS's cropland infield soil assessment protocol, soil health protocol, that's what this is. And so for each of these, we have actually described all the different ways, the definition that NRCS provides, the actual assessment indicator, if you want to make an assessment. And then what we've done is to allow this to also be used for monitoring, we've actually created categories that allow you to document what the current conditions are. And then if you want to use it in a monitoring context, obviously here we're just simply providing access as basically a quick library, but this will show up later. The soil conservation, what we currently have, it's not what you're probably familiar with, which is the NRCS's conservation practice database, our knowledge base. It's actually an international tool because again, this is an international app and we want to provide access. There are a total of 110 technologies and you can filter them. We were able to go in there and basically set up a filtering system so that you can select these. So that's the simplest way to use the app. So now let's go to the map and you click on a location, and I could have zoomed in as much as you'd like. But I just randomly picked a location. It's picked up the latitude, longitude, and I'm going to give it a name, which is, I'll just say 7 NCAT test. And normally I would leave this private button off because I'm interested in sharing my data and making it public. That can be really useful. But obviously there are privacy concerns. Some people don't want people to know what they think their soil is. They just want to know whatever NRCS thinks their soil is. So in this case, I'll hit private. So here now I've created that site. I hit save. It's downloading a bunch of information for this location. Okay. And as it downloads that information, it's going to start to put these little green leaves in here. And we're working on a better UI next time to make this more obvious. But the green leaves basically mean we're on the report screen. So if you look up at the top, there's report, there's data input. And little green leaves means that there's new information here. And this will continue to download more information. And you'll see green leaves showing up on more of these. So I'm just going to go into the land info. So it says NRCS here, but it also says soil grids. Well, soil grids, it's a digital soil map that predicts soil properties instead of actually telling you what the soil is. So it's telling me what texture is. Well, that's not very obvious. So let's scroll down and I've got a nice key here. Okay. And if I tap this button instead of texture pattern, I can give it a texture name. You can slow down and see that an L means loam. So it's designed to be as self-explanatory as possible. We've tried to go as visual as possible. So that's the prediction based on this global digital soil map. I'll go back and I can do the same thing on some of the other soils. I can switch to color. I can switch to rock fragments. So even without using the algorithm, the ranking algorithm here, if I'm out looking at a soil profile, I can just very quickly scan these things. I can also, if I want to, view a map of the plot location in SoilWeb. So those of you that have used SoilWeb, it's another way of accessing NRCS soil data. It's out of the UC Davis. And I will go ahead and click on that. And so what we're doing is we're actually going outside of the app And we can now actually zoom in on that location right inside, and we can start, exploring that. So I'm going to go back here, but some of these things are actually really useful. So if you're doing a conservation plan, you probably got a digital elevation model, but if you want to verify a particular location or place in the field, we can use one of these pictures. So I'm basically just going to hold, if you look at the video of me, I'm going to hold this thing up, and I'm just determining the texture. So I can use that. I could override that if I want to, because that doesn't make sense to me with this, and just use one of these pictures. Slope shape, obviously very important, whether we have a concave or a convex slope or a linear slope. And then soil texture, which I already showed you, but we can also record rock fragment volume, so I won't go through that key again. That's the guide me, or we can simply select it if we've already determined what that texture is. Oops. So we'll just say sandy loam, and I'm actually just going to select a few of these so that we can actually show you how that key, or how the algorithm works. We like loams usually, depending on the crop. And note here that I'm in centimeters, okay? So at any time, I can go to settings down here and more, and I can change that to English. So let's do that. I can also change the language. English and Spanish cover virtually the entire app. Kiswahili, which is East Africa, and French are only partially translated in the app. Okay, so let's go back. Soil color is kind of fun. We actually set this up so that you can determine soil color with an internal reference. And we are going to determine the color of, looks like a Starbucks wrapper, which looks better than our table. So I've selected my reference as a 3M yellow Post-it note. We could also use a gray card, the Y-Val or camera tracks. And basically what it's doing is this internal reference is compensating for the ambient light. Because of course, this Post-it note looks a lot different under fluorescent light than it does in the sunlight. So we'll go ahead and take a photo. We want to have both these surfaces very flat, even lighting. And in fact, you can see that if I change the, whoops, retry, so you can see this. If I just change the angle of this, see how the color changes? So, and if you have oblique light, it's even worse. So you want to make sure that everything is in the same plane. We'll take that picture, and I'll use that. And then I can touch the card, try to find some place relatively uniform, and touch the soil, and scroll down. And then I'm going to tell it to analyze. And it's doing all this on the phone. And it says, for those of you that are familiar with the Munsell, it's a 10YR 6x8. That's not too bad. Not perfect, but we found in some testing that novice users get about the same value with this as they do with one of those $200 Munsell books. So I can record that. Again, that's available in the tools. Then I've got some more of these things where I can record soil health. I've got my field observations. Let's go with soil structure. I can click on the question mark text again to learn how to do everything. And if I'd like, actually, I can even change the soil depths up here at the top and use a different set of soil depths. Vegetation, Laura actually showed you how this one already worked for the cover and structure, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but this is, you lay a stick down, we can record what the line point intercept is, we can swipe and use the same stick to record height. So now I can go back into the report screen, and all of this information, so if I go to land info, is now populated. So your soil, it shows up as loam, all that information. And if I hit synchronize now, what it's going to do is send all this information up to the cloud, and it's going to resort those. so you can actually see what it does. So the vegetation data, it's, if I go here to vegetation, if I've actually collected a full plot's worth of data, it automatically plots it, and it does all this offline. So it's going to plot your indicators for you. It's going to plot your trends if you have more than one, and all this is done again offline. So that's your vegetation. Let's go back to our 7cat now. So let's go back to land info and just show you one more function. And again, we're not going to get through everything today, but so if I go here, scroll down, it's actually calculating based on the data that I put in my available water holding capacity. And again, we will make this clear. AWC means nothing to most people other than a soil scientist. The app does explain it if you tap on the question mark text. And so it's estimating that based on what's called a pedotransfer function. So it's taking the texture. We can also play around with organic matter and watch how AWC and infiltration rate increases. I can also play around with compaction and see how that, so if I have severe compaction, obviously that's going to reduce my available water holding capacity and severely reduce my infiltration rate relative to normal. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because I want to make sure we've got enough time for questions. And again, you're welcome just to dive into the app yourselves.